Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch Project. In this video I want to talk to you about voluntarism, anarchy, statism, and the metaphysical aspects that a lot of people that follow these philosophies do not realize also apply to what happens in the afterlife, the reincarnation trap, the soul farm, the Archons. So I hope you'll stick with me as I try to explain this as best as I can. First, let's think about the words in general. And the word anarchy. What does the word anarchy mean? Now, words, especially in the English language, and I assume all languages throughout the world in one way or another, but the English language especially, the way that things have meanings that actually make the language itself like a form of magic. Matter of fact, the word grammar comes from grimoire. In its etymology, it literally refers to magic, incantation, spells. You spell words, you cast spells. Your body is made up of cells. When someone's imprisoned, they're put in a cell. I've mentioned these things before, but never in this context. So, when you think about the word anarchy, and I want to juxtapose that with statism. Statism is essentially anything that has to do with a government that has the authority to initiate force, take your money, do etc., all kinds of things that you may not agree with, for your own good, of course. Now here's the thing, I have a background that I worked for the government, so you might be asking yourself, how does somebody that worked for the government end up being like me? Well, we are all, a lot of times, trying to define on channels like mine, consciousness. And exactly what is it? Who am I? Well, I am always at the instant of my present awareness. So I am who I am right now, not who I was 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or when I was a child. As a matter of fact, if I could have a conversation with myself, say just 5 or 6 years ago, I probably wouldn't agree with my past self. My past self wouldn't understand what the hell I'm talking about today. So there's this thing about we grow up, we are infants incarnated as humans, incarnated with our minds wiped from who knows how many reincarnations. We get immediately bombarded with information and stimulus. The programming begins right away. You get programmed from your school, which essentially, in most people, destroys their critical thinking. But before that, you're programmed from birth, from the time and place of your birth, by a base code. Now, you can find out what that is by finding a competent Vedic astrologer. I've used Heidi Vandenberg in the past. She is amazing. But and you can find her on her YouTube channel, Channel 27, if you look that up. But here's the thing. The base code is what starts you off right there with a, you could be prone to certain types of behavior, so that starts. Then the information, your education begins, whoever's raising you, your parents, or a single parent, or foster parents, the school you go to. Immediately your critical thinking gets attacked. Your religion and your statism is programmed. Everyone, just about every person on earth is programmed by whether they're atheists and they grew up in an atheist household, or some form of religion, and all of them generally get introduced to the concept of the state. Back when I was more of a I guess you could say, a classic. If you're, before the word liberal got taken over by the libtards, the socialists and the communists, the Greek original classical liberal was more like a libertarian today, or in some cases more like even a modern day philosophical anarchist of the type that want non-aggression principles, individual sovereignty, that type of stuff. But before that, you have books like a book I read once, Mark Levin's Liberty and Tyranny. Now you're reading this book, and the whole thing that you miss, because you're reading it from his point of view, and from, of course, if you're sharing that point of view of a typical American who leans toward individual liberty, and you think that the way to get that is by promoting a certain type of statism, without realizing that in this book, Mark Levin describes in detail what statism is, without himself even realizing that any form of state is statism, right? And then you have the word anarchy. Words get corrupted. Words get corrupted and changed, and they're even used to control people. Even the word apocalypse is completely misunderstood. It doesn't mean what people use it for, which is usually used to describe a disaster or the end of the world. But really, the apocalypse means a revelation. That's what it actually means. See? Anarchy, you think of those Antifa SJWs, or you think of violence and crime, but in fact, here's the really weird part. The word anarchy, and I heard this on somebody on the Anarchast podcast said it. I don't remember which person it was, but I'll get back to this in a minute. But the word anarchy, and it struck me because it's so true. AN-Archon. An, which the etymology of the word and actually means not or without. And then you have Archon, which An-Archon or Anarchy means to be without Archons. Isn't that weird? And then you think about the whole concept of everything that happens to a human. Going back to what I was saying before. You're born with your mind wiped as an infant. You're bombarded by the environment, information you're getting from the people you know, your family, your schooling, your government, and television nowadays, stories, wherever you're getting your entertainment from. And it's amazing that critical thinking hasn't been squashed out of everybody. Some people are immune. I am one of these people that, even though I was fooled for a very long time in my life, there's a certain time where the things that would always bother me, I started to analyze and critically think. And really the whole point that I'm trying to make, and it's really weird, but when you learn about this stuff in depth, you begin to realize there's a correlation. And back to that as above, so below, and hermetics, I mean, you have the whole need to really get the message into you about submitting to authority, the myth of an authority you have to submit to, the whole process of when you die, and then if most people get caught up back into a reincarnation loop, or end up in some false heaven and then get reincarnated. That's the kind of model of reality that I think you discover when you study enough information. I have my source material on overwatchproject.com, and it's taken me years to go through this, so I don't expect people that aren't into the Gnostic philosophy to even understand where I'm coming from. But I mean, if you don't know the information that I look at, how can you even know what I'm talking about? So hopefully, maybe some of you will look at my past videos or watch my interviews and see what I'm really about. But for those of you that understand the whole concept of Archons and the reincarnation trap and all that other stuff, there is a thing that's going on as above, so below. When we end up on the other side, or free of our bodies, we're in a state of no longer needing to eat, being able to travel without any vehicles. We're immortal, we're formless, we can take any form we want probably. We are non-physical points of consciousness. And we could probably go anywhere. This is most likely a soul farm, a prison without any walls. We could leave anytime we want. In order to keep us here, the makers of this simulation reality managed to have come up with a really clever system of trickery to keep people ignorant. And just to make that even worse, we're robbed of critical thinking as soon as possible, and our consciousness is suppressed by our bodies and brains, so that we can't really think, as well as we should be able to, and we can't process all this information. We're overloaded with garbage information from all kinds of sources. Now, a lot of these voluntarists and anarcho-capitalists and such, they are out there making some great philosophical cases. If you want to learn about this kind of philosophy, I'll link to all this stuff, including this nice chart here of all these books. Now, Spontaneous Order here, this book right here, I've been reading this book. But there's so much to go through, and I've read some of these other books. I'm currently in the middle of this one, and they say this is a novice book. This is the nitty-gritty of a lot of details that people have questions about. How would you order, how could we have a stateless world or stateless society? And you see, when you get into this dialectic between different sides that keeps us all divided, you have these sheeple out there that don't want freedom. They've been so conditioned, and especially the ones that are completely mindless now, like the SJWs. They're just gone. Antifa and all that other stuff. When you have those people, and they get tagged as anarchists when they're not. They're really agents of future communism is what they are. That's what goes on there. But the whole thing that when you die, you get into the other side, and the whole point is so you're so brainwashed. Your ego, that's your human persona, temporarily follows you, and it's quickly you get met with your former loved ones, your family members, your pets, possibly a religious figure. They're all there to try to get you into the recycling center. Leaving this matrix means that you might have to consider leaving alone. If you really are meeting your family members or your pets, and you can communicate with them telepathically with a tremendous amount of information in no time at all, then there'll be an understanding that what is going on and what you have become aware of, all the information that you've learned in this life, so that they can make a decision to leave with you. But if they're trying to keep you in the system of reincarnation, then you may have to consider that either they're not leaving with you, or that they're not really what they appear to be. They may just be Archons. And so I'm kind of jumping back and forth here, because these two things I think are kind of connected. You have people out there that are promoting one of two sides of political systems, which is really all statism in any form. I'm not sure if you're voting for the typical American conservative, You're going to protect your self-defense rights, the right to bear arms, and several other things. And if you're liberal, you're going to get more socialism from your side of the aisle. And in the end, you still end up with a non-free state. And so when you think about where I am right now, where I've come from, for those of you who know some of my background, it's not easy for me to have deprogrammed myself from not only my religion, but statism as well. And it was kind of shocking to me just how much deeper statism is programmed into us that I didn't even realize when I was reading some of these books that I'm just reading a different alternative to a different type of statism. Statism is in degrees all over the world. Obviously, there's extreme statism, like in North Korea or in some other countries. And then there's this pseudo-freedom that you have in places like America, where as long as you go along with the program here, everything seems kind of fine if you happen to be okay. And you don't even realize just how regulated you are, how spied on you are, how much money is stolen from you. I mean, the really only difference between the word tax and the word robbery in definition is that the tax is done by the government. So a voluntary society, of course, means that people provide money, like GoFundMe, And if we had a voluntary society, people would pay for what they want and not pay for things they don't want. And guess what? Most people in America probably don't even know just how many people don't actually pay any taxes. So the government has them fully addicted to a system of handouts or keeping them suppressed while the other side pays all the taxes. And even how people think about things, here in America. Like, for example, if you own a home versus renting an apartment. But really, nobody owns any property in America except for the government. If you own a home, you have to pay property taxes. If you don't pay property taxes, the government comes and takes your home. If you resist, they will arrest you. If you resist enough, you could get hurt or killed. So, really, we live in a state of being where we have no different behavior from certain authorized group of people than you have from organized crime. But because it's labeled government, it's called moral. This is not easy for me to say because, even as like a sci-fi fan who grew up as I was a big fan of Star Trek, but even Star Trek has that flaw where it teaches you statism. I mean, what is the Federation? But a state. And can you leave? Can you not participate if you don't want to? It's just sci-fi, so, well, I don't know if it's ever been really explained that thoroughly. A lot of these books, apparently, here that you see here in this chart, are available here for free in some of these websites. So I'll link to that. And Professor Steven Pinker, if you ever heard of him, just how badly our language controls us and how manipulated we are. Some of his work, some of his writings, and some of his interviews that you can find on YouTube is really fascinating. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, but the whole thing that, like, if you're an artist, writer, you can do all kinds of grammatical inappropriate things, but if you're not known, then you can't do that, There's always double standards, always a way for the true magicians to use their magic while everybody else is suppressed. Anyway, I hope this didn't come out too disorganized or too rambling. I hope you kind of get what I'm trying to say. Basically, when we are here, we are programmed to be part of this whole system of authority that either comes from the state or from a religion or from groupthink And they try to make humans as sheeple as possible. Then when you die, you're more likely than not, if you've been totally engrossed in that programming, to see things on the other side without questioning that what has been done to you is now happening to you on the other side. But really, what can they do to you? When you're in spirit form, they need you to comply, because I think you could just leave. And if you realize that, I'm not going to cooperate at that state, I mean, you don't require anything. Here we're kept hungry, fearful, insecure, threatened. Our bodies and brains have made us not able to use intuitiveness, right? I've mentioned this many times before. Humans have to do things counterintuitively to get them right many times, depending on what they're doing. While all other life forms on the planet just have to follow intuitiveness, because it's the correct way to do things for them. But we don't. Isn't that fascinating? Like we're designed to be slaves. Perhaps there is something to all that Sumerian literature about the Anunnaki, about humans being made to be slaves. Slaves need to be submissive to authority. And so we have a world that is really effed up. So as far as voluntarist philosophers go, can they... At first they have to realize that there's this base problem. How can their system work when people are born and basically have to do things counterintuitively to make it work out so that you have a better world? That's a tough one. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Check out my minds.com page. It's really cool. There's a lot of stuff there. I post there now instead of my blog, and it includes all kinds of stuff, not just about Archons and reincarnation, but ancient history, interviews. Here's Bill Ottman. He's the one of the founders of Minds. Really great site. I hope it does well. I think it has 1 million users already. And it's got a lot of cool stuff there. So check that out. I'm not updating my blog anymore because I'll be doing my updates on Minds now. So my blog for my site is kind of static. It just kind of refers to Minds. My links section, I changed that today. I used to have it separated in 2 parts, but I really put them all together because everything, it goes in totality. So the Intel study links, source material, this is internet sources of information that you can look at. My big list of books, which is enormous now. And this stuff takes years to figure out, folks. It's not easy. It's not easy. My BitChute channel, which also I post there, and trying to not just be on YouTube, but, get off of that platform as much as possible. So, yeah, that's it for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to the comments, except for now I don't mind people that may be ignorant about certain things and they say things that clearly they don't understand what they're talking about. But I do mind when people now have picked up this new type of troll, the angry, insulting, enraged troll. Who knows, maybe there are Archons on there posting comments because they know I'm getting too close to the truth. Who knows? Those people I don't respond to. You're wasting your time if you're going to do that kind of stuff. You will go right to the ban list. Okay? I'm not here to convince people of anything. I've built a website that incorporates a lot of source material. That source material can be reviewed by anybody. You can do your own investigation about reality and come to your conclusions. That's what's really about Gnosis, is gaining your own knowledge, not getting it from me. I'm just here to share what I think, what I have learned, And you can listen or not. You can investigate for yourself or not. That's what the beauty of freedom is. Take care. I'll talk to you later. Have a good day or a good night wherever you are. And thanks for tuning in.